I've been having even more retro fever thanks to a friend who gave me a box full of Intellivision games. I'll talk about that, and then I'll cover the retro games Asteroids Hyper 64 and Namco Museum 64 on this, the 9th episode of the N64 Podcast. Let's start the show. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, so if everything sounds a little bit different, it's because I'm not recording on my usual setup. I'm using the same microphone, the same programs, but I'm actually recording this on my kitchen this time instead of in the basement like I normally do. Preferred to do it this time up here because A, it's a little bit warmer in the kitchen, and B, I have a server downstairs that hosts the website, and you can hear it sometimes in the background. Or maybe not. I try as much as I can to cut that out. So it's been a crazy week. So I'm recording this a little bit late, and I apologize about that. So a guy at work the other day, he keeps telling me about this box of games that he has in his pole barn that he wants to bring to me. And I'm wondering, I said, well, you just tell me how much you want for him. Well, come to find out, he didn't charge me anything. He's a nice guy like that. He's had them forever. Apparently, he had bought them at an auction years ago, and they sat up in his they sat up in his like pole barn after he had purchased them, and so. The thing was completely disgusting, as you can tell. It was an Intellivision 2 in there, and it had all the plugins and stuff, and there were 30 games included with this, and there were actually quite a few boxes. Only one of the boxes I couldn't salvage. It was completely destroyed, and I felt so bad for it, but the game was fine. All the games so far tested and worked and cleaned up. The system, though, the problem is those controllers have a plastic membrane in them. Excuse me. And the plastic membrane, it has a little bit of corrosion on it. So they have definitely been corroded, and so parts of the controllers don't work. Now, I already have a standard Intellivision, the original model, in really good condition, and it works fine. But this is just to add to the collection. So I cleaned the thing up as best I could, and it needs to be retro-brighted, which I plan to do. And so then I also started cleaning the games and the overlays, and I have it all cleaned up now. And I'm thinking about what can I do to repair these controllers? Well, I'm going to buy a conductive pin. And what you can do with a conductive pin is basically retrace the circuits on the plastic membrane inside of the controller. And it should be good to go. You can tell exactly where it needs to be retraced because it is like it's supposed to be a silvery color on the membrane. Well, it's actually a darker, corroded color. And you can't really scrape that off because it's just scraping away this coating that's on there already. So I've actually made one of them slightly worse. I mean, no big loss. They weren't working at all. And getting those controllers open is a bear. I did break a couple of the plastic prongs, but it's 40-year-old plastic. Well, close to 40-year-old plastic. And so I can understand. The system works fine. I mean, it fires right up. And today we finished cleaning the last batch of games and got them actually relabeled and stuff because some of them were missing the labels. Luckily, the labels were in the actual bottom of this one little tin that he had in there. And so I actually went through and I ended up just taping them on. I didn't want to go the route of finding glue and masking it off. I could have done that. They look okay with some Scotch tape covering them. And I mean, these are really old games, and they're not of high value. None of the games in there are rare, but there were a couple that stood out. Now, my household, we grew up playing Atari. That's what we had. That's what my brothers had, and that was the first console I ever played. And we didn't have an NES at the time, so I remember playing, like Pac-Man and stuff on that. And so my grandmother, though, she actually did have an Intellivision. Not for her. A different story about her. She used to play Tetris a lot, which I will bring up when we get to the Tetris episode of this podcast. But she used to have an Intellivision because my uncle used to have it when he was a kid, and I remember playing it over there. Now, I didn't really remember other than she had one. That's all I remembered until I saw this box of games. And I remembered two of the games in there. One was Night Stalker, a very, very good Intellivision game in my book, and the other was Beauty and the Beast. Now, Beauty and the Beast, if you're not familiar, has nothing to do with the classic fairy tale or Disney movie or anything. It's actually kind of a a remake, if you will, of Donkey Kong, or a knockoff of Donkey Kong. So basically, this guy has stolen your girlfriend, and he has brought her up to the top of this skyscraper, and he's throwing boulders at you, and you've got to run up the skyscraper to rescue her. And of course, he's throwing these boulders and stuff, and to get up on the different levels of the skyscraper, you go in through open windows, and that's how you advance up the level. As you go up the tower, the game gets harder, and it shows you in between. Like, you start off at the bottom of the skyscraper, and then as you clear that section, it goes up to the next part, and it keeps showing it on this overlay map till you get to the top. It gets harder and harder because the building gets thinner and smaller. But I love that game, and it's an iMagic game, and the iMagic games, if you remember those on the Atari, they had their own look to them. They had this like rainbow banner across the top with some really cool artwork. Well, the Intellivision games are the exact copy of that, but they're smaller to fit into the Intellivision because those games were physically smaller. And so it actually has the box to it. There were 4 iMagic games that had the box and manuals and overlays, so I recovered those. I was able to clean those. I mean, some of these games had like wasp nests inside of the box, and so it was a major undertaking to clean them up. And I posted them online to one of the retro gaming groups, and a lot of people were like, oh, really cool. You have to let us know how the repairs go. And I'm like, well, it's going to be several weeks worth of projects here because a lot of these are in really bad disrepair. So that's what I've been doing this past week, was getting those games up and running and repairing them. And I did it in my free time and work. You know, I had like an hour for lunch, so I would go out back with the air compressor and clean them off, take a Q-tip. We've been sanding some of the contacts on the cartridge. The one we couldn't even get to fire up. We had to take it out of the case, insert it directly in the Intellivision, couldn't get it to work. We're all out of ideas. My buddy, who's a electronics wizard compared to myself, he's like, I'm out of tricks. So I said, you know what, this ain't, if it breaks, it isn't a total loss because it wasn't working to begin with. So I took a pair of small tweezers that we have in there, and I took the cartridge apart, and I actually sanded down with those tweezer heads onto the gold contacts and actually could see the crud coming up, and I got it to work. It was Reversey. So I did all that work for a copy of Reversey. But I just love restoring these old games like that. They're very important. I plan to add them all to my collection, even the Intellivision 2. If I never do get working controllers for it, it's still going to be proudly sitting up there next to the actual Intellivision 1 that does work. And, I just love collecting these old games and restoring them and getting them back up into working order. So it's been quite a fun project. So that's why I wanted to cover the games today that I chose, because I was in a retro mood. And I discovered that there are actually some retro games, one remake and one that is full of emulation on the N64. And that first one is Asteroids Hyper 64, or Asteroids 64 Hyper, whichever way you want to say it. And it was published by Crave Entertainment, developed by Cyrox Developments, released on December 1st, 1999. Now, Cyrox was renamed to Climax Group when they were bought in 2001. It was founded in 1992. They made a ton of licensed games like Jungle Book and Lion King on the Game Gear. They made the Asteroids for PC port and the N64. And the last game that they made was Diner Dash, Sizzle and Serve. Now, when I say the PC port of Asteroids, I remember in the 98, there was this Asteroids game that came out. It was like Activision Value Publishing. Well, they made it. And so Crave, of course, the publishers of the game, they have published a lot of games, Fighting Force 64, Gex Enter the Gecko on Game Boy, Gex 3, Deep Cover Gecko, and Star Lancer on the Dreamcast, which Star Lancer is the precursor to Freelancer, and Freelancer is one of my favorite games. And matter of fact, me and my buddy used to run a server that was mildly popular on the multiplayer scene back in the day called Bretonia's Best. So if you ever played on that server, that was me and my buddy Grim. We ran that for quite a while when Freelancer was in its heyday. Had a lot of fun on that server. We had like a little story going on, a Civil War type of thing, and it was a lot of fun to play. Used to host that out of my house on an old Celeron processor computer. It didn't take much, believe me. Had a DSL connection. It was more than enough to put up with it. And so the game is up to 2 players, and it uses the Rumble Pack, and the controller pack is required to save. There's 3 difficulties, say normal, hard, and expert mode, and you get to choose from 4 ships when you start the game. Now, the back of the box of Asteroids Hyper 64 here says dozens of power-ups, wild card weapons, and impact shields, more than 90 amazing levels in 6 zones, exciting multiplayer modes including co-op and deathmatch, incredible graphics in 640 by 480 mode. That's all it says. The game is rated E for everyone, has mild animated violence. And so it's got 5 screenshots of various levels from the game on the back here. And so it is, it's okay. I honestly didn't care for this game when I was playing it. Be honest with you, I had a lot more fun with the Asteroids version on the Atari 2600. And I don't know. They say the graphics are amazing in 640 by 480 mode. So I went through the options, and there are no options for mode. The only options between load and save is sound. There was no choice for video. And the graphics just, to me, look like a budget title like it was. You know how I said in one of the earlier episodes about graphics on the N64? Some of them have that N64 look to them. This game doesn't. It does not look like an N64 game. And that's because I think it's all two-dimensional. I mean, the asteroids are in 3D, and your ship is sort of in 3D, but the control is crazy. So in the original Asteroids, you had, obviously, on the Atari, it was different, I'm sure, on the arcade. I've never actually played the arcade version of Asteroids like the original, but the Atari was the one I always played, and that's what I'm based this off of. You had your fire button and then your joystick. Whichever direction you moved, if you wanted to turn left or right, you turn the joystick left or right. If you want to go forward, you would push up on the joystick, and that would fire your thruster. And you had like physics at play. So if you thrusted a little bit, your ship would continue to move in that direction slowly but surely in that direction. If you hit back, that was your warp, and you would appear in a random spot on the map. So this game has all of that, but to me, they goof something up major. And that is when you move the analog stick, your ship doesn't move. Instead, you have to hit a button to fire thrusters. And that, when you're trying to move, hit a button to fire thrusters and hit another button to shoot your gun, it gets complicated and too complex in my book. I mean, they took a very simple premise and they made too much out of it. The weapons, I mean, the power-ups are floating around out there. I could never figure out what half of them did. You did get shields, which were a nice touch if you could remember to hit that button quick enough. And you did have your warp, except your ship would kind of just disappear and reappear. And it's like, I know it's a simple game, but I guess I'm expecting more from the N64. I want it to basically go out there and actually maybe do a little bit of animation. So, I mean, the game is okay. I wouldn't consider it a must-play for sure. If you're into Asteroids and you want to play a 2-player mode, I'm sure it's a lot of fun like that. I couldn't find anybody to play with me on that level. But it was an okay game. It's just okay. The graphics are kind of muddy, kind of ugly. The asteroid graphics do not look very appealing at all. The explosions don't look very appealing at all. There are better examples of how to do explosions on the N64, like Duke Nukem comes to mind. Those explosions look far better than the ones in this game. But once again, I think it was a budget title. The zone differences, the only thing it changed as far as, I'm sure that obviously the difficulty ramps up. But I got to like level 6 or 7 on the first zone. And from the screenshots I've been seeing, it basically is just a different background. I can't really tell that much happens. And so what happens is this animation, your ship, when you start the game, your ship will come up and this kind of portal opens up and your ship appears. And so it's like, it makes a noise and it comes in there and all the asteroids pop into place. You destroy them all, your ship goes back in the portal, and then it says level 2 and the whole animation process starts over again. That's the different levels. And so the game was, lead programmer was Alex Darby. Now, Alex Darby worked on Asteroids for the PC, Star Wars The Clone Wars, and, Star Wars The Clone Wars and Republic Heroes. Those are games that he was a lead programmer on. David Bland was the lead artist. He worked on Rockstar's Table Tennis and as the creative director, and was a writer on GTA, Chinatown Wars, and he did the graphics for Mercs back in 1991. The music was done by Rocket Music, so that's another thing. The music in the game is not very good. It's just kind of bland, generic music. Basically, it looks like they bought some stock music by Rocket Music here. It's nothing memorable, nothing right up there with like the Pilot Wings score or anything of that matter. So that's pretty much Asteroids in a nutshell. It is Asteroids. I don't know what I was expecting, like maybe a lot more out of it. Maybe I was expecting too much. And so the game, I mean, it's okay. The emulation on it, default plugins, input force feedback explosions are slow. That was the description in the emulator, Project 64. I don't know. I was playing it with Glide, and there's no issues in Glide that I can find. So I wasn't using the default, which is usually JBo's in graphics plugin, which your mileage may vary between JBo's and other games. The purchase price of this game, you can get on Amazon for $7.95 with free shipping on Prime. So if you're a Prime member, you can get this game obviously shipped free. And I also found a couple other ones here. One was $3.97, and it had $3.98 of shipping. So the shipping is worth more than the game. eBay, I only found one, and it was $13.99 in free shipping. So my final thoughts on the game, I just wrote here that graphics are meh, and that's how I feel about it. It's definitely, I would honestly, if you're looking for an Asteroids game, stick with the original. You could probably bypass this one. It's just okay. I'm sure the 2-player co-op and the 2-player deathmatch would add a lot more fun to the game. I couldn't experience that myself, but for single-player gameplay, if you're looking for Asteroids, I guess one thing that is good about this is that it does have the ability to end, which the original Asteroids didn't. The original Asteroids kept going up in score. So, you know, that was just a lot of the Atari games were high score games. How high of a score can you get? They didn't really have an ending. There were very few that did, like Pitfall 2, those kinds of games seem to have endings. And so that was very rare on those games. Secret Quest has an ending, but that was the last game made. So that's my thoughts on Asteroids Hyper 64. Now, looking at the other game here, Namco Museum 64. Now, I didn't even know this was on the system, to be honest with you. I knew that they made collections on other games or on other systems of this exact same collection. It was published by Namco it was published by Namco, and it was developed by Mass Media, released on November 29th, 1999. Now, Mass Media are the guys that their logo is an elephant standing on a TV. They developed XCOM 2, War of the Chosen, Evolve. Remember the whole Evolve game that came out? I guess it's kind of dead now. I'm not sure. I don't keep up on that. Mafia 3, Saints Row 2, Red Faction Guerrilla, Darksiders 1, and many others. So they're very talented people. Although Red Faction Guerrilla, they were listed as the developers. I could have swore that was Volition. But I don't know. This is what was popping up when I looked up mass media development. Now, Namco, everybody knows Namco, and I don't think I have to give you their history. The granddaddies of arcade gaming. Great games came out of there. Pac-Man, Ms. Pac-Man, Galaga, Galaxian, Dig Dug. I mean, it's just hit after hit after hit of the early days. I'm not sure of what else they've been making lately. The game uses the controller pack to save your data, and it uses the expansion pack in the system. It's for up to 2 players alternating. And so on the box, for 2 players alternating, it shows an outline of the second controller. So you have the one controller. And on the N64 boxes, when they show the different controllers, you see that the one controller, and then you have them all stacked up. Well, behind the stacked up is an outline of a controller. So that's what they did there to represent that, I guess you could say. And so I don't know what the expansion pack is for. Maybe it needs that extra RAM to load an emulator or something, because these are the actual arcade ROMs. So it's got 6 games on there. You got Pac-Man, Ms. Pac-Man, Galaga, Galaxian, Pole Position, and Dig Dug. Now, the games all played great. And so I will get into the emulation here in a moment, because one of the games did not play great. But I mean, as far as being true to life, sound, audio, and visuals of the games, they worked great. They sounded perfect. They played perfect. It was a great game to have in your collection, in my opinion. Now on the box it says, only for N64 on the front of it. It's got that little peel back on the top right of the corner. And I know that's because it's the quote unquote 64 variant of it. But obviously this was made on many, many other systems. And so it's definitely not just for the N64, but this one is a nice one to have in your collection if you have some retro fever like myself right now. Now, the game's obviously Pac-Man. It is a classic. Pac-Man is really good. Run around the maze, eat all the dots, and the ghosts, of course, will, chase you. Obviously, Miss Pac-Man or Ms. Pac-Man's the same way. Galaga, great shooter. Galaxian, another great shooter. Pole Position, an awesome racing game. kind of like an F1 car, sprint car racing type of game. And then Dig Dug, the classic game where you are digging deep down into the dirt and blowing monsters up with an air pump. It's a great game. Now, the back of the box here says, let's see here. It's kind of funny. It says, bring home 6 of the greatest games in arcade history. And so it says, keep those quarters in your pants. With Namco Museum, you can set up your own arcade with classics like Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, Galaga, Galaxy, and Pole Position to Dig Dug. Genuine arcade translations with genuine arcade options so you can enjoy them at home on the Nintendo 64. Skip college, become an arcade owner. Just like the authentic arcade uprights, change settings to control difficulty, number of lives, etc. simply by adjusting each game's dip switch. You're an arcade god. It's a blast from the past. The exact arcade translations. Get all the graphics, sounds, and gameplay of the original coin-op hits, authentic in every detail. And then it shows a box it has pictures around it, and it shows all the games. You got Galaxian, Pole Position, and Dig Dug, and Miss Pac-Man standing off to the right of that. And then on the top right, starting and going down, you got pictures of Pac-Man, Ms. Pac-Man, and Galaga. And Pac-Man's up there in the corner, and he's leaning off and winking at you. And it is E for everyone. And obviously, these games aren't like overly violent or anything. And these are classic arcade games. They play well. Now, obviously, the game had... I can't talk about the original games because they obviously had different people who worked on them over the years. So let's talk about this card exactly. Andrew Green was the lead programmer. Now, Andrew worked on Marvel Superhero Squad as in engineering. He also worked on Full Spectrum Warrior and 10 Hammers as a programmer. 10 Hammers being the sequel to Full Spectrum Warrior, of course. Nigel Spencer did the shell/music and SFX programming. He worked on XCOM 2, War of the Chosen as UI, pipeline programmer, Warhammer 40K as software engineer, and Marvel Superhero Squad as an engineer. Music was done by Jim Andren, and of course, I mean like the menu music and stuff. Jim did the music for Namco Museum 2002, PlayStation 2, and Pac-Man Fever and Pac-Man Collection as well. And my overall thoughts on this game, the presentation is very nice. The menu options to get out of the game is great. It just boots up to 6 classic arcade games, and you get to play them at your leisure. The audio is all there. You fire up the game, and like Galaga, and it starts playing the song and stuff, and it's just all memorable. It comes back to you. Pac-Man, of course, a really fun game to play, and Ms. Pac-Man. All these games are great. These are great games to play. These are great games to show children what gaming used to be like and what it was. I recently finished playing Far Cry 3, and that is a tremendous game. And I know Far Cry 3, wow, well, here's the thing. I didn't have a computer when it came out. I happened to get a free boxed copy of it, long story, and I never had a computer that could really run it that well, so I kind of installed it, got the Uplay stuff set up, and I'd never finished playing it, and so I finally did finish playing it here recently, had enough time to actually finish. I was already like halfway through the game. I didn't know that at the time. It was kind of short. I wasn't doing the side quests. I just wanted to go through the main story. And, that was a fun game, but it was a lot of time you have to sink into it. These are fun games you don't have to sink a lot of time into. You got 20 minutes to kill before something you have to go do or something comes on, or you just got 20 minutes so you want to have a break. Fire up one of these games and you'll have fun. You don't have to have amazing graphics or crazy sound effects or open world running and shooting and diving and bombing. I mean, those things are great, but you have solid gameplay here. The gameplay is solid. It is spot on. It is an awesome collection to have. I highly recommend it. On the emulation side effect, though, if you're going to emulate this, I tried this with two different video plugins. I didn't try any other emulators, just the normal Project 64, and Galaga freezes. And it basically freezes everything. You have to go up to menu and reset the emulation. And it's right after it plays the intro, and all of the ships are flying in, and then bam, it just freezes on the same spot every time. I'm not sure why that was, but it definitely was acting up. And so that is the only downside. If you're going to play this, I would recommend highly purchasing it. It is a great game. You can get it on Amazon for $8.54 plus $4.99. So that's the Amazon price for shipping here. So $8.54 plus $4.99 to get it shipped. On eBay, I found one for $8.50 with free shipping and higher, of course, higher prices. And believe me, that $8.50 is a great price for this game. If I found this in the wild, so to say, for $10, I would definitely be adding this game to my collection. I really like it. This is what I was looking for. I wish Asteroids was this good, but it's not. You can tell when one's a budget title and one had a little bit of love put into it. So yeah, I think that's about it for this episode. A little bit of a shorter one. Just wanted to cover some retro games. Episode 10 is coming up. Episode 10 is going to be kind of a milestone. I mean, 10 episodes. That's pretty good. That's going. That's going to be a major episode, so I'm going to be covering Star Fox 64 in that episode. I'm proud to announce we're going to cover a big league game here. I mean, I consider Pilot Wings to be a big league game, but obviously when you look on lists of great N64 games, it's never really on there on the top games. It's on my personal top list, but that don't mean it's on everyone else's. So I'm happy to say that we're going to be covering Star Fox 64 in the next episode. So if you guys want to say anything, I'm going to put the word out on Twitter and stuff tonight as well. I'll be taking audio submissions, and I will be taking written submissions. Whatever you want to say about Star Fox 64, share your memories with me the first time you ever played it. What'd you think of it? How much fun was it for you? For me, it was a blast, but you'll learn that in the next episode. And by the way, I always am accepting audio or written submissions for the games. I know I don't have a list up there yet, and I'm going to work on that. I'm going to see if I can at least give everyone a week or two notice before, saying what games I'm going to cover. But I will always be glad to take audio and written submissions. This podcast, it's a labor of love, and it's a labor of doing it by yourself, unfortunately, due to my circumstances with time. So I would love to accept any audio submission anytime, even if it's not over the game we're going to cover. If you just want to talk about N64 stuff in general or anything else coming up, let me know, and we'll squeeze it into the show here. I have no problems doing that. If Nintendo ever does release the N64 Classic or aka N64 Mini, believe me, I'm going to be talking about that on here, and I would love to hear your guys' input. I have the NES Classic and the SNES Classics, so I plan on getting an N64 Classic if they are going to do it. I know it's kind of hard to emulate the N64, but if a lot of guys can do it in their free time, like Project 64, and get it dang near perfect, then I'm pretty sure that Nintendo can get the same guys that made the other ones to come up with their own emulator. So yeah, Star Fox 64 on episode 10. I think it's going to be a great show. I'm hoping to make it a longer episode. It's going to be because I plan on breaking it down level by level, even some levels I never played and probably never will get to because I'm not super stellar at the game, but I have beaten it on the, not the super good route, but I have beaten it. So obviously the website is N64Podcast.com. You can reach us on Facebook, and that's Facebook.com/N64Podcast. If you ever want to tweet, it's at the N64 Podcast, or my personal Twitter is at AndyVGR. You can email show@N64Podcast.com. And the N64 Podcast is on Google Play Music and iTunes, and now Stitcher. I can gladly say we are on Stitcher. So give us a good review on iTunes if you don't mind. That helps the show out tremendously. You can also catch the YouTube version of the show at youtube.com/AndyVGR. Once again, it's just a static image. I haven't gotten around to wanting to record myself lately. And I also post, obviously, like I said, on my personal Twitter, just about anything else that comes to mind. Like the other day, I was writing about Andy Capp's Fries. Long story. I didn't know that was a comic, so it's just kind of interesting to read about it. And I just want to say thanks to my wife for giving me the time to put all this together again and encouraging me to pursue this fun hobby, and everyone else in the podcasting community. Ferg and the guys over at Super Podcast Bros, and even the guys that emulate this. Those are a bunch of great guys to listen to. They're a lot of fun, and so it's just really nice to be able to be in a community like this. It's really good, and they're very accepting guys as well. So it's really nice to have this kind of community to do this in. I know I came over from YouTube and I started doing a podcast because, it just made more sense for me to record a podcast. It was a lot easier than doing video editing. And let's face it, I'm no angry video game nerd on my videos. I do from time to time get some bad feedback on the videos. And, you got to realize those things are like 9 or 10 years old, some of them. And those are the ones I've been getting some some bad comments on. They say never read the comments, but I like to read the comments and stuff. I don't have a super high, I've been doing YouTube for like 10 years, and so it's never really been a super like high-end project. I've got like 1,400 subscribers now, almost 1,500, where I'm really close to getting there. And I'm not wanting subscribers, really. I mean, if people want to subscribe and hear the podcast that way, that's a great way to hear it if you don't want to put it on your phone or device. And we are also on FM player now, too. So I got to add that to my closing here. So yeah, Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, and FM Player. I reached out to the FM Player guys because the listener of the podcast, SDP, said, "Hey, how come I can't get your podcast here?" So I told him I told SDP how they could put it in there manually. But then I got a hold of the Player FM guys. "Hey, can you add my podcast?" And I said, "Yeah, here you go," and sent me back the link. So if you're using FM Player, you can now pick the podcast up on there. So it's been a really great experience doing this, and I'm so appreciative of all the great feedback I've been getting. I appreciate it, guys. Love it. Love every one of you. It's great stuff. We're having a lot of fun here talking about retro games. Just the way the world is going this day and age, and you read the headlines and you hear scary stuff. I was just reading one this morning about a guy that killed his ex-girlfriend in Britain. I won't even get into the details, and it's just very sad news and stuff. It's just great to be able to take your mind off of that for 20 or 30 minutes. Or if you listen to the Super Podcast Brothers, take your mind off of it for 3 hours. It's a nice thing there, guys. I'm not complaining, believe me. It's just nice to be able to take your mind off your troubles for a little bit. And I hope I brighten your day. All you guys are brightening my day. It's just a lot of fun to do the podcast, so I greatly appreciate it. The show's theme song is Techno Axe's Edge of Tomorrow. And last but not least, I want everyone to do this, and everyone to feel this, and I want everyone to just embrace this, and that is good gaming, everybody.